Because I've already told you the first Americans were Africans. Let me say that again. The first people on this continent were from Africa. It was recorded, it is written, it is archived, it's in Africa, it's in the libraries over here. The scholarship has been done. The first people here were Africans. That's undisputable, okay? But y'all don't want to admit that because you hate yourself. So, pretendian.
Neither is Africanus our origin. So you call yourself an African. You are not an African. You were before there was an Africa. Look at yourself. I'm an African American. Stop it! They named this country after Amerigo Vespucci, one of the grafted members of a grafted people that are Johnny-come-latelys on our earth. Now you're going to call yourself an American and an African, both of them named by Caucasian people. What was the original name of that continent? And is that your home?
Where are your institutions? If you want people to join your fictitious nation, you have to have institutions for these people. Where are the pretendian communities? Where are the pretendian casinos? Where are the pretendian reserves? You don't have none, and you're never going to get none. And I'm going to tell you why. None of the leaders of the pretendian community, not one of them, is an institution builder or an activist. Not one. Let me say it again. I need my millennial gang to listen up, because y'all the ones they brainwashing. I need my millennial gang to listen up. There's not a single pretendian spokesperson who is an activist or an institution builder.
You open your mouth and you think you know what you're talking about because you have your master's degree. You don't understand the psychology. You have your master's degree. That's why his name is first and above your name on that piece of paper. Because that means you have successfully been indoctrinated into his way of thinking. That's why psychology is a prerequisite in most of your curriculum classes. Because I need to make sure before this Negro gets access to this area, he needs to put my mind in his head and remove his own. So he ain't gonna think for himself before I put my name and stamp him as an approved Negro who is now a worker and not a thinker. Shout out.
None of the leaders of the pretendian community, not one of them, is an institution builder or an activist. Not.
Madam Chair, Permanent Forum Sisters and Brothers, my name is Redonna America Harrison. On behalf of the Foundation of Indigenous America of Ancestry Heritage Institute for Indigenous American Studies and the American Heritage Registry, we are here today as human rights defenders for the Earth Peoples of America. It is a hidden but not forgotten fact. America is a home with Earth for the people created by Earth who look like the Earth and carry its blood for America. America is a home of an ancient race of Earth peoples who have nurtured our life as America since the beginning of time. Many people curse America as representation of the United States, but America, her people, our soil, like many other indigenous nations of populations, are living under occupation by a political nation state. We are here to clarify: the United States is not America. The United States is established on an earth and heritage belonging to the collective population of indigenous females for America. America is not the United States. We are not Americans, nor the names that have been stigmatized upon us. We, the females of America with the blood of the ancient ones, stand in our earthright as America, are here to say to all of our cousins of earth, who like us carry the blood of earth, we, the females of America, have not forgotten our purpose to life with earth, and ask for forgiveness for all of the horrible crimes that have and still are being committed in our name of America. We do not support the destruction of the waters, air, or sea. We do not support the draining of the lifeblood of the planet Earth as oil, or the extraction of the forests and the extraction of its minerals. We as America are making it clear we love America. Over the recent generations, our focus has had to change from nurturing our life with America to surviving from all forms of constant states of genocide against America's race of peoples, from the United States policies to exterminate our population from our soil. The United States has combated the human rights violations by passing new policies that remove our ability to politically implement our human rights, UNDRIP, and all other international instruments for redress. The children of America are not immigrants or refugees to America. We understand we hold the key to the emotion needed to create the solutions to the many complex challenges that we face. In this regard, FIA, Foundation for Indigenous Americans of Anasazi Heritage, represents Negro Americans in our original ethnic identity of Anasazi. That was the name of our race before we were changed to American Indians. And in 1705, American Indian women and the descendants of American Indian women were changed to Negro and were used in the captivity of the slave trade that we have known so and have been so eloquently educated and miseducated about, which has become a very, very deep thorn. You know, it's like a constant wound bleeding since this horrible education to dehumanize us has been a part of our experience. No one is born a slave. Slave is an experience that is put on a captured or a oppressed people. And set the record straight on the ethnic identity of all Black American people who are descendants from Negro women and men. Period. In I Have a Dream speech, you know, many people say, we came from boats on from Africa, and this is not true. So I wanted to give some documentation to clarify this issue, because we're not Africans. We're not African Americans. We are the Americans. Okay, so on that note, I am not the only one. I felt that the best documentation to give, to put out there for everybody, so that everyone knows who they are, is documentation directly from Martin Luther King. And in Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, third paragraph, and as you see, I marked it here for you. Third paragraph, it makes it very clear on who we are.
But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free.
But 100 years later, the Negro is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination.
100 years later,
100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity.
100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity.
100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself an exile in his own land.
100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society, finds himself in exile in his own land.
Now, of course, if it's his land, it's also who? Her land. Women are the ones who create the races. All nations are created from the wombs of the women of their species. So, Martin Luther King didn't say exile in Africa or as a captive in a foreign land. He didn't say as an African living in a land. He said exile. And as people, we are still living and being considered a nation in exile within a nation. And I'm saying this because there's too many people who are being robbed of their human dignity and just being totally exploited over this question of black Indians. There is no such thing as a black Indian. There is no such thing as half Indian. All descendants from American Indian women are Negroes or Negroes. And I don't want to use the derogatories of colored and niggers and all these other things to denote. But that means, what does that mean? What was Martin Luther King saying? He was saying that he was indigenous and that we were being excluded from the artificial society. And one thing he constantly called the United States was our nation, because they had been told that they were to be included. Now, if you read the second paragraph, and it says, in a sense, we've come to, from Dr. Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream speech, paragraph 4, it says, in a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check.
In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check.
When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence,
when the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence,
they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir.
they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir.
This note was a promise to all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Now, anybody who has actually understood that level of history, yes, that was a promissory note to men, but it was not actually a promissory note to descendants of American Indian women. So those men were still considered 3/4 of a human being. So the question is, how come in 1963, if you look at any tape of Martin Luther King, you will see that thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people were protesting for the treatment they were in their own homeland. So how come in 1963 everybody understood that Negro people were the Indians, and by 19 93, 73, we now became Africans.
Right.
Okay, so there's been a defrauding going on here. But the question we should be asking, why are we changing our name? And who's influencing us to adopt an artificial identity? Now, I understand that African word may have been a suggested political word. But to change our ethnic identity to African, where did this agenda come from? Well, the agenda actually goes back all the way to the 1890s, in which our own beloved, that many black historians call to Frederick Douglass, made a comment about. And I tell people to refer to Frederick Douglass, The Folly of Colonialization, in which Frederick Douglass says it is a proposition to colonize the colored people of America in Africa. What does that mean? It means that they want to make the indigenous American people defraud themselves and move voluntarily into Africa. Now, what would that consist of? That means that you would come there and invade another group of people's land under the ideology that you have an inherited right to a land you don't belong to. How many of us here, the DNA BS, Gates, we got DNA, he got DNA to somewhere in Africa, Oprah, promoting a school in Africa, but yet she doesn't promote anything here in America. We just have to return to our nature. Now, how to do that takes education. But the Foundation for Indigenous Americans has already started to set the groundwork for all Negro descendants to register so that they can be counted as Indigenous Americans. It's not hard. It's a simple step. Anybody, especially anybody born after 1950. Because as we know, if in 1963, all of us, all our elders knew that they were Indian, the question is, why didn't they tell the generations after that what their birthright was? Even though we may not like what has become of what our ancestors left us, it's up to every generation in their truth to make a stand and make a change. But we don't have a right to deny the future generations the inheritance of life given to them because of the mistakes of our ancestors in the past. We need to take stock in who we are. Now, why haven't we taken stock? Because we haven't taken a moment as a people to understand why we are being oppressed. Oppression always goes down. But I think now that we're in the belly of the beast, it's time for us to understand our story. And the greatest legacy we have is our heritage. All Black American people are the American Indians, period. And the racial identity of all Indians is brown skin with beautiful curly hair from every level of wavy to the curliest of curl, from the lightest of cream to the bluest of black, to the broadest of nose and the fullest of lip, to the Asian iconic eyes. That is who we are. That is our ethnicity. And as you see, you look at this beautiful sister. She's 10,000 years old, found right here in America. All right? She is one of us. Think about it. I know this sister, her descendant who looks just like her, living today in Atlanta, Georgia. So it's just to show that we've been in America for thousands upon thousands of years. And our ancestors have made tremendous contributions to America. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be standing in our truth. Especially sisters, because there's a very propaganda to beat sisters and disrespect them for their right to be mothers? Why is that? And this is a form of genocide. All of these things are a form of genocide. So if anyone tells anyone that they are not indigenous, then you bring them back to Martin Luther King. Because Martin Luther King represented indigenous people on his homeland as an indigenous American man. We are not Black Americans. We are indigenous Americans. And America is us.
Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty! We are free at last!
Reverend 9 America collection of books are the first books published in the United States educating Black American people about their original ethnic identity, ancestral heritage, legacy, traditions, culture, language, and home on earth origins in America before slavery. Reverend 9 America was appointed ambassador by the Anasazi Covenant Council in 2003 to advocate for the Heritage Children for Americas with the Foundation for Indigenous Americans of Anasazi Heritage, FIA. FIA is a IPO advocating on behalf of the people of America heritage descendants racially identified as Negro Black Americans to receive their collective fundamental human rights to be recognized as a viable race of people still living in their home on earth with the human dignity to be respected for their actual ethnic heritage identity to America, human rights, indigenous rights, and included in representation as part of the planetary indigenous community in the international arenas. Many people choose to ignore what Martin Luther King meant by these important quotes. How could the so-called white man bring us copper color, aka Aborigine people from Africa to America if we were already here before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth? How could the so-called Caucasian people bring millions of us copper-color Aborigines from Africa to America if we were here before Jefferson and his people wrote up the Declaration of Independence? Many people choose to ignore this. It's not that hard to understand what Martin Luther King was trying to tell us. Hell, even Google understands what Martin Luther King was trying to tell us, that the land or soil we call America belongs to us Negroes, copper color races, aka Aborigines, now identified as African American or Black. Google even understands we are in exile in our own land we call America. So if the first people in America were Africans, why would these Africans leave Africa, their own motherland, travel to America, then begin constructing thousands upon thousands of ancient pyramid mounds all over America? There are so many ancient pyramid mounds in America, they cannot be counted for. That's how many there are. Then thousands of years later, after constructing a countless amount of ancient pyramids in America, the Africans decide to go back to their motherland, Africa, then begin constructing the first ancient pyramids all over Africa. Why would these Africans choose to construct ancient pyramids in America first, then thousands of years later decide to start constructing ancient pyramids in Africa when Africa is their motherland? That makes no sense. Don't tell me the Native Americans or modern day American Indians we see on TV constructed these mounds all over America, because those same Native Americans have stated they did not build these ancient pyramid mounds found in America. This American Indian, Native American is going to tell you they did not build the mounds.
Because my ancestors, my recent ancestors, used scaffold and buckle burials when we didn't build mounds.
The host decides to ask an archaeologist who's responsible for building these mounds. Not once did the archaeologist reply, American Indian or Native American are the first in America. They are responsible for building these mounds.
Who is responsible for building those mounds?
I think we kind of see this all across the Americas, where for some reason you've got, agricultural crops start to show up and people coalesce into villages and then larger cities and then eventually these giant large city states. Cahokia is one of them. Chaco Canyon in the Pueblo world is another one. Andean societies, of course, Mesoamerica. And then, for some reason, a good 500, 600, 800 years, there seems to be just some kind of dismantling.
So why do I bring up the ancient mounds or ancient pyramids in America? Because many of the ancient pyramid mounds all across America predate the pyramids in Africa. So when the Watson Break Mound, located in Louisiana, was in full effect, population thriving, the pyramids in Africa didn't even exist. So is Dr. Umar saying Africans left Africa, went to America, constructed thousands upon thousands of ancient pyramid mounds all over America, then decided to go back to Africa thousands of years later, then began to construct the first ancient pyramid mounds out in Africa? If Africa is the motherland, why would Africans travel to America, construct ancient pyramid mounds all over America first, then thousands of years later, construct ancient pyramids all over America? Do you know how much time and people that would require? The ancient pyramids found in America that predate the pyramids in Africa are documented, archived. You can check the libraries. They are recorded. They are written. They have all types of books on them. The scholarship has been done. Even Google also knows about the ancient pyramids and cliff dwellings of America that predate the pyramids in Africa. The only race of people that could have the closest and greatest connection with these ancient pyramids found in America are the original, authentic owners of the land, which are the Negro people of America, the Aborigines of America, the copper color races, the only race of people that have always been found in America, now falsely classified as Black and African American. There are modern day Native Americans or American Indians that have a lot of education, graduated from Harvard, and have their own Native American institutions. And they have publicly stated the Aboriginal people are the original landowners of the land. They did not say the Native Americans. No, Native Americans and Aboriginals are two different races of people. They did not say the Africans. They did not say the Moors. They did not say the Hebrew Israelites. They specifically said the Aboriginals are the original owners of the land and are being silenced and marginalized and invisible.
We also acknowledge and make visible that Aboriginal people have been silenced and invisible and marginalized, and yet they are the original owners and caretakers and stewards and prayer leaders over the land. And they who guide and help our ecology to grow. And so it's important that we prioritize with respect and reciprocity and relationship the constitutional priorities within indigenization.
Do we all understand what she is saying? This is very important. She never said that Aboriginal people of America died out and no longer exist. No, she's telling you they or we Aboriginal people of America still exist to this very day. You may ask yourself, well, how come we don't ever hear anything about the Aboriginals of America? How come we were never taught anything about the Aboriginals of America? You have to pay attention to what she said. The Aboriginal people of America are being silenced, invisible, and marginalized. That's why foreign power has to constantly change our identity. Indian, now we're Negro, colored, Black, now African American. They don't tell us we Negro people of America won Mexico's independence, and we are the only reason why Mexico has its independence today. This sounds like a race of people that are being silenced, invisible, and marginalized. Remember, this is a Native American woman graduated from Harvard speaking the truth. I am going to explain how we Negro Aboriginal people of America are still being marginalized to this very day.
So the government makes so much profit off alcohol in small towns, but what about the profit accumulated and dispersed amongst the different Native American communities? Many still receive some type of support, maybe some type of income. Many have thousands, maybe millions of acres of land all across America. Many still receive free health care, free financial assistance if they choose to to go to college or learn a trade. This doesn't sound like oppressed people that are being neglected and marginalized. Marginalized people are denied involvement in mainstream economic, political, cultural, and social activities. How is the modern day Native America being denied these activities? We copper-colored melanated people don't receive any of this type of support, regardless of the contribution our ancestors have made to protect and serve this continent we call America.
Remember 17, 18, and beginning of the 1900s, we weren't allowed to speak about our original authentic identity, language, heritage, and culture, or tell our children because we could face jail time, prison time, sometimes even death. Remember, we couldn't learn to read, write, or spell. It was against the law. And if other ethnicities were caught teaching us, they would also face jail time, prison time, sometimes even death. That is a pure example of a race of people being silenced, invisible, and marginalized.
I tell people to refer to Frederick Douglass, The Folly of Colonialization, in which Frederick Douglass says it is a proposition to colonize the colored people of America in Africa. What does that mean? It means that they want to make the indigenous American people defraud themselves and move voluntarily into Africa. Now, what would that consist of? That means that you would come there and invade another group of people's land who, under the ideology that you have an inherited right to a land you don't belong to.
This sounds like the exact agenda Mr. Umar Johnson is promoting, trying to get his own American Negro brothers and sisters to defraud themselves and move voluntarily into Africa, to a land we don't belong to. The people of this land we call Africa still has not went to the United Nations and publicly confronted the powers that be about foreigners kidnapping their people. Why? Because they know we are not their people. Umar Johnson knows his agenda requires us to invade Africa, another people's land, with the belief that we have some type of inherited right to someone else's land. We have to wake up, people. This could potentially cause a huge war, or just a bunch of chaos and misdirection and confusion. I haven't did that much research on Frederick Douglass, but I do know around his time there was a movement or an agenda being promoted that required the Negro people of America to defraud themselves and voluntarily move into Africa, claiming someone else's inherited right. I don't know if Frederick Douglass supported this or if he was against it, but I do know he made many comments about this agenda in his speeches. This speech from 1894 is by Frederick Douglass, called The Lesson of the Hour. There are some interesting statements Frederick Douglass made in this speech that I'm curious to know why Umar Johnson does not emphasize on or explain some of these statements made in this 1894 speech by Frederick Douglass. We're going to go over a couple of statements made from his speech. The Lessons of the Hour, speech by Frederick Douglass, January 9th, 1894. You can find many of his speeches in the State Historical Society of Iowa. You can find them in the Department of Interior. You can find them in many public libraries. They're everywhere. So let's get into it. This proposition is to colonize the colored people of America in Africa or somewhere else. Frederick Douglass did not say this proposition is to colonize the colored people of Africa now residing in America back to their homeland, Africa. No, he said this proposition is to colonize the colored people of America, which means America is our land of origin. Let's continue. It is all nonsense to talk about the removal of 8 million of the American people from their homes in America to Africa. Who is Frederick Douglass referring to when he mentions the removal of 8 million of the American people from their homes in America? He's referring to the Negro people of America. Pay attention to when he said the removal of 8 million of the American people from their homes in America. Now, to my brothers and sisters, where is Frederick Douglass trying to tell you your home is? America. Let's continue. With the hope that by persecution or persuasion, the Negro can finally be driven from his natural home. So what does this mean? What does this consist of? The American Negro being driven from his natural home. Frederick Douglass is basically saying the American Negro is naturally from America. He never said with the hope that by persecution or persuasion, the Negro can finally be driven from America back to his natural home, Africa. No, Frederick Douglass specifically stated, with the hope that by persecution or persuasion, the Negro can finally be driven from his natural home, which is America. Remember what Martin Luther King said, the Negro is in exile in his own land, which is America. These are some very important statements in Frederick Douglass' speeches that I feel Umar Johnson should maybe emphasize on. Does he agree with some of these statements? Does he disagree with some of these statements? It sounded like Frederick Douglass was clearly aware of the American Negro naturally being from America. It sounds like he is fully aware that the American Negro naturally comes from America. So I'm just curious to know, does Umar Johnson disagrees? Does he disagree with this, or does he agree? It is so sad how many of our own people are trying to colonize us into Africa, a continent we don't belong to, and other people that look like us. It's just sad how many of them are trying to actually have us defraud ourselves and pretty much take on another continent that doesn't even belong to us, invade.
We want to unite the liberation in this country. We want every Negro to work for one common object, that of building a nation of his own on the great continent of Africa, for the purpose of bettering our industrial, commercial, educational, social, and political conditions.
Offering you a real solution to every single thing you complain about. Always beating you up. Go invest in Africa and set your situation up to where you can move to Africa. Job not treating you right? Go invest in Africa. Set up some businesses. Set up some investments so you don't have to depend on the old white man for no job. Baby mama cheating on you? Go to Africa where the women actually appreciate a man who provides. The women are not propped up by all these freaking whack-ass government entitlement programs, welfare, food stamps, Section 8, which tells them that they don't need you as the black man. They can do it on their own with a little bit of struggling, a little bit of crying, a little bit of pain, and a little bit of blood, sweat, and tears. Go to Africa where they don't have all that stuff. So when the man comes home and he's providing for the woman, she actually appreciates him and honors him like the king that he is. Somebody give me a problem in the comments. Give me a problem, and I can tell you and tell you exactly why Africa is the solution to that problem. Our solution is Africa.
The first people on this continent were from Africa. It was recorded, it is written, it is archived, it's in Africa, it's in the religion.
But we black. Whether we the first Indians, we still came from Africa. Where are the majority of black people?
Also, does Pan-Africanism strikes back? Does he disagree or agree with some of Frederick Douglass' statements? Also, does he believe the U.S. government will let us know if they found Negro skeletal remains that exposes everything and let us all know we were the first and this is our land? Does he believe they would let us know?
African. So you're going to create a fictitious identity. And let me say this. It is your right to create a fictitious identity. I ain't got no problem. Pan-Africanism is the original black man's ideology. Pan-Africanism will be the black man's last ideology.
That is completely incorrect. These are pictures and videos that I'm showing you of our ancestors in early America. Now, Pan-Africanism was not their ideology back then. I'm telling you, Pan-Africanism, look at the signs all over the place. Look at the signs when they're marching. Look at all the newspapers. You do not see them representing Pan-Africanism as their original ideology. You see Negro, 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 colored, colored, Negroes. Negro woman, Negro man, Negro child, colored man, colored woman, colored child, colored people, Negro people. You do not see African boy, African girl, African people, African, no, you don't see that. Why don't you see it? Because Pan-Africanism was not our original ideology, nor was it our ancestors' ideology, because you would see more Pan-Africanism ideology when you take a look at the footage from back then. It's right there in our face. If Pan-Africanism was our ancestors' original ideology back then, we would see all type of Pan-Africanism signs all over the place. Like example, we're Africans, take us back to Africa. You guys stole us from Africa. You don't see these type of signs. I want to go back to what the brother was saying about indoctrination and the master's degree. We're going to dig a little deeper.
You open your mouth and you think you know what you're talking about because you have your master's degree. You don't understand the psychology. You have your master's degree. That's why his name is first and above your name on that piece of paper. Because that means you have successfully been indoctrinated into his way of thinking. That's why psychology is a prerequisite in most of your curriculum classes. Because I need to make sure before this Negro gets access to this area, he needs to put my mind in his head and remove his own. So he ain't gonna think for himself before I put my name and stamp him as an approved Negro who is now a worker and not a thinker. Shout out.
I've talked about and a lot of my work has built around cognitive imperialism, and cognitive imperialism is the kind of like the when you become Eurocentric educated, you and all of the kinds of knowledge systems and languages that belong to your elders and so on. That kind of whitewashing of the mind is what cognitive imperialism implies. It also defines success for indigenous people as being those who assimilate to dominant norms. Oftentimes, I'm always talking, they say, you're so successful. And I say, well, I'm successful because I sound like them. You know, my success because I went to, Harvard and Stanford is my success. While I think that has a measure of success, it is not the success that I ultimately want. It's how can I balance a knowledge system and language systems in the same way as I have this in English, I should also have that in Mi'kmaq and also in other languages that are in my territory. So we are always being put up as how our success is garnered. If we have a job, if we speak English, if we look a particular way, if we're, even more successful is if your color of your skin is a little bit lighter than others. So one of the things that, I always say to people is that we have no conventional place or form of place from which we can develop our indigenous knowledges. Only through our elders, only through our communities, only through the language that are being held, and only through our beginning to build a foundation for making that possible.
Government schooling is the most radical adventure in history. It kills the family by monopolizing the best times of childhood and by teaching disrespect for home, parents, and culture. Education is the information to maintain the social order of control. Wait a minute. Control over what? Control over the authentic identity, heritage, and culture of the melanated people of America and where you come from, and your true purpose and reality. Now remember, we are referring to the melanated people of America and the melanated children of America. All children of the females of America are to receive a free education for conditioning that will erase their heritage, ancestry, culture in America and replace their earth heritage with America with an artificial narrative as his story of the United States. So what does this mean? It means that the education system is trying to condition our minds into erasing our true heritage, ancestry, and culture here in America. And they're trying to replace our earth heritage that we have here in America with an artificial narrative that is called history. His story, not ours. Remember, they are conditioning our minds and erasing our heritage, ancestry, and culture we have here with America. The heritage, ancestry, and culture we had here in and with America before anyone else. The Europeans in 1705 renamed all Anasazi Amerindian females and all life created by them as Negroes in their new patriarchal society, meaning people from indigenous females of America to capture for use as money for commodity exchange of soil into land. Over time, Amerindian females and her people from being identified in the new artificial identity as Negro by the new patriarchal society loses the importance for the connection to the Anasazi ancestral identities for their planetary Anasazi Amerindian females of America's heritage identity. As a result, the identities become invisible. The European collective continues to promote the assimilation of Anasazi Amerindians males into individualism as the way to live free as an American in the new European U.S. society, instead of upholding their collective preciousness in the Anasazi life culture of their blood with America. The United States starts the public school education system for the assimilation of all Anasazi Amerindian heritage children into a slave mentality of cultivated workers to serve the United States. Negroes who have been so long inconvenienced and denied opportunities for development are naturally afraid of anything that sounds like discrimination. They are anxious to have everything the white man has, even if it is harmful. The possibility of originality in the Negro, therefore, is discounted 100% to maintain a nominal equality. If the whites decide to take up Mormonship, the Negroes must follow their lead. If the whites neglect such a study, then the Negro must do likewise. Question which concerns us here is whether these educated melanated persons are actually equipped to face the ordeal before them. Negroes, daily educated in the tenets of such a religion of the strong, have accepted the status of the weak as divinely ordained, and during the last 3 generations of their nominal freedom, they have done practically nothing to change it. No systematic effort toward change has been possible, for taught the same economics, history, philosophy, literature, and religion which have established the present code of morals. The Negro's mind has been brought under the control of his oppressor. When you control a man's thinking, you don't have to worry about his actions. You do not have to tell him not to stand here or go yonder. He will find his proper place and will stay in it. The same educational process which inspires and stimulates the oppressor with the thought that he is everything and has accomplished everything worthwhile depresses and crushes at the same time the spark of the genius in the Negro by making him feel that his race does not amount to much and never will measure up to the standards of other peoples. The Negro thus educated is a hopeless liability of the race. As another has well said, to handicap a student by teaching him that his melanated face is a curse and that his struggle to change his condition is hopeless is the worst sort of lynching. It kills one's aspirations and dooms him to vagabondage and crime. What is vagabondage and crime? Let's take a look at vagabondage. A person, usually without a permanent home, who wanders from place to place, nomad and idle, wanderer, without a permanent home or visible means of support, tramp, vagrant. Now, let's look at crime.
Walking around, looking for a way, but no one tells me which way to go. I'm caught up in a world, a labyrinth of maze, where yes men could easily be no. I ask them no questions, they give me no answers. Following the wise, but they're walking in paths.
When a Negro has finished his education in our schools, then he has been equipped to begin the life of an Americanized or Europeanized white man, knowing nothing of your ancestral heritage or authentic culture you have always had here in America with America.
Successes are going to be constantly measured against the ability of our indigenous nations and languages and cultures and communities and teachings and ceremonies and traditions to be at the same level as all other of these particular places.
The big question that was a breakthrough for myself and many people in boarding school was when a good friend of mine, Clyde Warrior, asked the question of what grants these Eurocentric teachers the privilege or right to intervene in our minds and our traditions, whereby colonizing it. That it was assumed that because they were teachers, they were doing the right things in boarding schools. But he raised the question, and we couldn't answer it, that what gave them that right? We respected them as teachers to a certain extent, but they weren't teachers in our traditions. They weren't teachers of the summertime. They were teacher of the fall and the winter and the spring, but they weren't the teachers of the summertime. And so we started challenging that issue, and the only thing that our teachers could say is, well, the government makes it compulsory for you to be here, which wasn't a real answer, it was a power relationship. But it was really their belief that Eurocentrism was the only universal knowledge system in the world, and that for us to get ahead, we had to learn that. And we kept saying, well, what does get ahead mean? That we have all these black people in the South who are protesting because they speak English, they're educated in the Eurocentric system, but you won't let them drink or live or eat in the same places as you. So why do we want to be part of you that oppress the black people if that's our ultimate goal? And so that was the big question. But their only answer was the myth that there is only one knowledge system in the world that's valid. It has all the truth, it's universal, it's applied everywhere, and that this will give you the ability to cope and make a living and become successful.
Which is Eurocentric education or Eurocentrism. Eurocentrism and Pan-Africanism, notice they sound just the same, pretty much fall hand in hand. They are damn near the same thing, similar ideologies. They both believe American Negroes can only come from Africa. They both teach the transatlantic slave trade theory. Remember, how can Pan-Africanism be the original ideology of the American Negro if Pan-Africanism did not exist prior to the 1800s? They both try to convince the American Negro mind into believing Africa is their homeland and the only continent that can benefit you as a collective race and individually. They both promote American Negro slavery as if white slavery never existed first or never existed at all. They both promote the same exact transatlantic slave trade theory without providing proof of the thousands of boats used and the specific forests cut down to manufacture thousands of wooden boats. Eurocentric education is the education we all were taught in school.
Well, everything they use as a source is from a European source.
Eurocentrism is a European view of the world, a European perspective of other people's histories and cultures. Eurocentrism revolves around European influence, beliefs, opinions, theories, science, superiority, and European domination. Eurocentric is focusing on European culture and history. It is centered on Europe and the Europeans. It means to reflect or interpret the world in terms of European values and experiences. Eurocentrism is a systematic distortion of existing realities. Eurocentric social theories and ideologies seem to have been contaminated. I'm going to explain how most of us have been subjected to many different types of Eurocentric social theories and ideologies. Eurocentrism is in all the public and private educational systems, elementary, high school, and college, which can also be identified as Eurocentric education. Eurocentric education is centered around the past, present, and future of Europe and European people wherever they reside. It is education whose primary concern is the maintenance of European social economics, political, and cultural domination of the world. Regardless of race or skin complexion, all the different public and private educational systems that focus on the maintenance of European social economics, political, and cultural domination of the world will be considered Eurocentric education. If whatever school or high school or college you attended only taught you about the past, present, and future of Europe and European people in history class, you have been subjected to Eurocentric education. Once you graduate from their public and private schools, their universities, the only thing you will have and know about world history and your history will be what a foreign European government has taught you. When you graduate from their schools, the only thing you will know about your history and world history is a systematic distortion of existing realities, contaminated Eurocentric theories and ideologies. You are programmed to know nothing about your authentic identity, heritage, and culture. History in elementary school only teaches you about the past, present, and future of Europe, European people, and continents centered around Europe, such as Spain, Rome, Greece, Egypt, Africa, etc. High school and college teaches the same exact Eurocentric theories and ideologies in their history classes. They teach the first human civilization came out of Africa. Where's Africa? Right next to Europe. Christopher Columbus and his men were so-called European. Some say no, they were Spaniard. Okay, where's Spain? Again, right next to Europe. Columbus took orders from people that were what? Centered around Europe. They also say Columbus kidnapped millions of melanated people from Africa, transported them to America, then kidnapped hundreds of thousands of modern-day Native Americans, then transported them back to where? You guessed it, Europe. They teach Europeans dominated in Europe, Spain, Africa, America, and continue to dominate the world. They teach us and embrace the past, present, and future of European colonization. They don't teach you that melanated people won 491 battles in Mexico, including Mexico's independence. Barack Obama was not the first melanated president of America. Vincent Guerrero, who won Mexico's independence, was president way before Barack Obama was ever thought of. Remember, most of America we know of today was a part of and considered Mexico. They don't teach when Europeans arrived to America, they found copper-colored aboriginals. They don't tell you Martin Luther King stated multiple times his people were already here in America before the Europeans, and how the melanated people are in exile in their own land we call America. They don't teach you the original Statue of Liberty is a melanated woman. They don't tell you some of the ancient pyramid mounds and cliff dwellings in America predate the pyramids in Egypt. They never show you the millions or thousands of slave boats used. They never show you the forest that was cut down and used to manufacture the slave boats, but they still want you to believe in the transatlantic slave theory. They don't tell you about the many prosperous melanated communities that were bombed and tore down.
Is that it? That's all those blow-down muscles will give you? All show and no go.
Oh, I got plenty of go.
You must have misplaced that when I kicked your ass up and down that office of yours.
Yeah. Just like you Brits rewriting history, huh?
They even tell us in the movies. So please, ladies and gentlemen, let's try not to act like we are not aware of this foreign government rewriting history ever since they stepped foot onto America's soil. And let's not forget who controls the education system, who's in charge of what we all are being taught in history class. The same damn foreign government responsible for rewriting history and trying to rewrite us Negro Aboriginals completely out of American history. The same Brits that rock is referring to about rewriting history, many of their descendants and other descendants that have origins centered around Europe control our government to this very day. Now, everyone should understand that just because we Negro Aboriginals of America are promoting and teaching our authentic identity, heritage, and culture that has been stolen from us and hidden does not mean we are teaching and promoting rhetoric, eurocentrism, or pseudo-history. The main one responsible for promoting and teaching rhetoric, eurocentrism, and pseudo-history is the Department of Education and the people trying to get you to defraud yourself and voluntarily move into Africa, claiming somebody else's land, invading somebody else's territory. Let's take a look at this picture of 1798 located at the British Museum. If Pan-Africanism was our original ideology, there should be some type of Pan-Africanism representation on this painting of America in 1798, right? So around this time, according to the Eurocentric public education we all were taught, the transatlantic slave trade was going on. How come these two boys are not in chains and shackles? Out of all the things this painter could have painted, this painter decided to specifically paint two Negro boys standing on American soil dressed up as Indians, aka Aborigines. According to the 1828 Webster's Dictionary, if Europeans found the copper color races known as Aborigines, we are clearly looking at the American Aborigines in this painting. Pan-Africanism teaches the first Negroes in America were Africans, but the two boys in this painting are clearly not African, nor are they in chains and shackles. Eurocentrism teaches the same ideology and teach the first people in America were the modern-day Native Americans we see on TV today. But these two boys in this original painting of America are clearly not the modern-day Native Americans we see today, which should make you realize that both Eurocentrism and Pan-Africanism are promoting pseudo-history and rhetoric.
What you're looking at right now, all right? You guys can see right now what you're looking at. You can see this is from the British Museum, all right? This is in the British Museum. This is a picture of America, all right? And as you can see, the sign at the bottom says the emblem of America. Now, when you look up the word emblem, that word emblem, one of the synonyms for that word of emblem, one of the synonyms for emblem says representation. Representation. So they're showing you what America looked like back in these days. And this picture was published in 1798. All right? By John Fairbairn. You see that? And as we read the description of the picture, it says allegorical figure shown full length standing to the left, holding a standard showing the stars and stripes and an eagle, looking at two black boys wearing feathered headdresses. Two black boys. Now, my question to them is, if Native Americans are the indigenous people of America, why would you not have Native Americans on this painting? Why? Because, like I said, if people that they call themselves Native Americans, if those people are indigenous to America, why would you not have these people on these paintings? That makes no sense. Why do y'all have two boys, and they made a point to say two black boys. Don't let that go over your head. They said black boys, showing you that these are not Native Americans. They are not Native Americans. It says two black boys. Those are Negroes on this painting. That's what they were trying to illustrate in this painting. So my question is, why don't they have pale skin, long straight hair, pale skin, long straight hair, Asiatic Native Americans on this painting in 1798? Because the Native Americans, supposedly, they were in America at this time, right? So why were they not the face of this painting? You have to ask yourself those questions. You got to ask yourself those questions. It says two black boys wearing a feathered headdress who stand on the left while gesturing towards a pillar decorated with oval portraits of Cumbus, Americanus, Raleigh Washington Adams, and one another in the oval frame 1798. They have two, and don't say they didn't have the paint. Don't say they didn't have the paint to paint this, because clearly you see white people on the wall right there, and you see a white lady. Why is it says two black boys? Why? Because this is what America looked like. That's why they called it the emblem or the representation of America. That's what America looked like. America were black people, ladies and gentlemen. Black people.
Nor did it say African boys. Don't let that go over your head. The Pan-Africanism ideology Umar Johnson is promoting did not exist during the time this painting was painted. So you tell me, is Pan-Africanism really the American Negro's original ideology or not?